Countries around the world are taking extreme measures to contain the spread of Omicron. Israel will become the first country to give a fourth dose of the vaccine for medical staff and adults over the age of 60. Israel's health ministry expert panel made the recommendation last week. Germany's government is also weighing a potential fourth COVID shot, despite major pushback from its citizens.
In Ontario, new COVID public health rules include online school for the next 2 weeks, a ban on indoor dining, gyms ordered to close, and indoor gatherings limited to just 5 people, with outdoor gatherings restricted to 10. Weddings, funerals, and other religious services are capped at 50% capacity of the particular venue. Meanwhile, a Danish health chief has said that Omicron may be the last of COVID and that we, quote, will have our normal lives back in 2 months. And that the spread provides a good level of immunity in the population. I mean, we've been hearing that for a very long time, and every time we hear it, I get excited for it. And I think maybe it's actually true this time, because I do think at some point that will be true.
Right. At some point, 2 weeks or 2 something, will be true.
I don't know if it's this point.
But they did say 2 months and not 2 weeks, so we'll give them some credit with that.
Right.
So they bought some time. I think that's really interesting. So, Denmark is heavily vaccinated. They're clearly indicating that they think then that natural immunity is the immunity that's going to end the pandemic. I'm personally not so sure about that. I do think natural immunity is showing to be stronger, obviously, I think at this point, than vaccination. But we don't know how long it lasts. I mean, look, I want to end the pandemic just like anybody else. I just also am trying to follow the science and realistic about this. We don't know how long natural immunity is going to last. So to think that this pandemic will end when the virus goes away and when we see low levels of infection, I don't know how realistic that is. And I hate it when they set us up for that. Maybe the pandemic ends with Omicron because Omicron just doesn't cause severe symptoms.
Right. It's
so
also it's a little bit of a tautology to be like, yeah, it'll be over once everyone has it. Like, well, then it'll be like, that's the thing with natural immunity, right? It's good that having already had COVID does offer you some fairly robust protection. You don't hear a lot about reinfection. I think it's happened on occasion, but still, that involves you having already got COVID, being in some period where you possibly were spreading to others. So while it is good, that's like a side benefit of like the silver lining of having COVID is that now you're probably not going to get it again, and so that you're not going to give it to somebody else. But you needed to actually have COVID to get there, which is the thing we're trying to prevent in the first place. So it's a little bit of it's a cold comfort. I think this has got to be the end. I mean, I've wanted it to be the end forever. Now everyone is getting it. Everyone from the most cautious to the least cautious people. Maybe if you're really wearing your more advanced mask and you're limiting your contacts, you're not going anywhere, you don't have your kids in school, you're still taking everything super seriously. Maybe you've got a little bit more protection. You do have some degree of additional protection, but it's no guarantee. I know cautious people getting it now. Meanwhile, huge protests in Germany against COVID restrictions have been happening for nearly 2 months straight, and the size of the crowds continue to grow. In efforts to stop protesters, the mayor of Munich banned COVID protests in the city, but citizens have not complied. Police brutality against protesters is rearing its ugly head as tens of thousands packed the streets of Munich. The police struggled to contain them, resulting in violence against police and civilians.
Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, yesterday, protesters against COVID restrictions were mauled by police dogs and beaten with batons at unauthorized protests after the leftist mayor triggered an emergency order to stop the march. More footage of the protest in Amsterdam showed Dutch Army veterans being attacked by police officers while trying to protect people protesting from the police amid the protests. Some of the veterans were later arrested. So, all across Europe, this has been going on for months in Europe. There's been widespread, massive, unbelievable protests, mostly protesting COVID passports and people being prevented from working or traveling or dining or, for not being vaccinated. And so people are up in arms, and it's not ending. And yet the government continues. And with Omicron and finding out that Omicron is not posing any real dangers for the areas that have it. I think one of the dangers, though, was that here in the U.S., they claimed that Omicron was like 70-something% of the cases. It was really only 20-something% of the cases. I think that a lot of people kind of let their guard down. And I know a lot of people who seemingly caught Delta. during that time, thinking Omicron's around, right? So we do still have to be careful. But you know, are they ever going to lift these restrictions, even with Omicron showing to have mild symptoms, or are they just going to continue on until there's no virus?
Well,
I mean, what's the end game here?
I think the interesting thing here, so with these protests, with that footage we're seeing, which is terrible, so, you know, Germany or Munich just says, okay, well, protests are banned, doesn't work, then you have these violent confrontations. So they can't do that here. I mean, they can try, but you'd get sued and you lose. You can't. The First Amendment provides robust protection for protesters. In America, you can't. I'm sure local officials try it various times in various contexts. Yes, protests are banned, but you could sue and you would win. You know, maybe the ACLU would get off its butt and help you out. Maybe not if you're gun-toting conservatives, they wouldn't. But you know, they've done a lot of good advocacy. But we don't see a lot. I don't think we're seeing a lot of protests, even though we do have the right, and they can't take that away from us, because in general, it's just the kinds of people who would protest against these things now live in areas where where you don't have strict restrictions, and in blue areas. I would join a protest, but I'm virtually alone, or maybe less alone every day. But there's not a desire to do it in Democratic-controlled areas, or has not been much of one.
Yeah, it's interesting in that way. It's more democratic in that sense. In that, right? Robby would be the guy on the street corner shouting. Kim, what's it been like in LA? Have there been protests against the restrictions, or are people there just like, all right, this is how it is?
Yeah, there haven't been really any protests. You know, with LA, the restrictions are so strange because LA City has really strict restrictions. You can't go inside of restaurants or bars or movie theaters or gyms unless you have a vaccine passport. But LA City is like Swiss cheese. So all throughout the city, you can find areas that are not technically LA City. They're incorporated other areas like Culver City, which also has the mandate, but Santa Monica, there's the county areas, there's Inglewood, there's all of these various other cities, and they don't have the mandate. And so it's kind of the people that don't want to adhere to the mandates can just go down the street and find restaurants and bars and movie theaters that don't require all of these things. Orange County doesn't have any of it. You just go down to Orange County. So, I mean, it's, you know, there's been workarounds. I also know a lot of people who are probably faking it. You know, they're going around with their fake cards. It seems that's also a thing.
You think fake cards are really a thing now?
Yeah, I do. I think that there's a lot of people that are actually using them. But you know, that I think that's, you know, what are people going to do?
We've got a mandatory show your vaccine card type deal. We've not had that in DC. It is coming. So we'll see if a market for fake cards.
And it practically is just an honor system because it's basically just an index card.
Right. Well, I just show a photo of it on my phone.
Or a photo of an index card.
Yeah, I'm not going to carry the actual thing. I don't even know where it is. It doesn't fit in a wallet. It's awkwardly sized, of course. Our government. Thank you for that.
I got mine in Vermont. It fits nicely in the wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly young people, I think, that are you know, doing what young people do when they secure fake IDs and
Don't
weed.
like it. Don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow on Rising, we'll continue to monitor the situation on I-95 and across the country due to the winter storm.
And Brianna Joy Gray is back.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.
See you then.